when I've been mentoring students from the undergrad program at U of T. What they tell me when they do the mock interviews is I've problem solved or I've done analysis, and it's like, okay, great, tell me more, right? Okay, hi, welcome to Ubiquity. Today we're going to do a little bit of a different episode with all of the COVID-19 situation happening. A lot of the way that we work has been changing, and one of the major ways is that we're using a lot more video conferencing, and that is starting to impact hiring as well. So in the hiring process, a lot more companies are now turning to video interviews as screening. And to talk a little bit more about that, I've got my guest here who was my career coach at Rotman, Annette Filler. So welcome, Annette. And could you tell us a little bit about what you do and then talk about video interviewing?
Sure. Hi, Eugene. Well, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to join you today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself.
Yeah.
I am a career coach, and I've been a career coach for over 10, 12 years now. 6 years I spent at Rotman, working with MBA students and students looking to transition into new careers. That was a great experience. Prior to that, I had an outplacement of a career transition company.
Yeah.
And what we did is we worked with those individuals, some of them who had been outplaced from their current jobs, and really had to rethink their careers and what's next for them, and gave them the tools they needed to take it, to find that next role.
Right.
Being able to apply some of those tools for students or mid-career or senior career is something that I'm doing right now as a career management coach. I'm also working with companies and helping companies and their managers be more effective at managing their teams, especially in today's world with COVID-19.
Yeah.
They need to manage remotely, so I'm having an opportunity to work with a number of smaller organizations, fast-growing organizations, to do that more effectively.
Yeah, and it's a totally different way of managing, right? When you're not able to see someone face-to-face every day. It's
Absolutely. And how do you keep them engaged? And make sure that you're communicating effectively. And everybody also has different styles of how they work. So good manager is usually in tune with that. And also, how do you give feedback? There's a lot of new issues around effective management.
Yeah, for sure. So let's dive into our topic today. Let's talk about video interviewing. So a lot of companies have shifted towards this, and you have some facts and figures actually from recent years.
Absolutely. The first, about 2018, I saw a report. It was definitely a trend of using video interviewing as a part or earlier part of an interview process, which was great. More and more companies thought, well, it's more efficient. They can see more candidates. They're also able to collaborate with other team members to see video interviewing. So at that point, the studies that I've looked at were about 60% of companies indicated that they were using video interviewing at some point in their recruitment process. In January of this year, there was a report where that number had risen to 80%.
Wow.
And the number of companies that are planning on using it starting this year is higher than that at 92%.
Wow, that's
a
lot.
Each one of us will at some point be interviewing by video, not just face-to-face or in the same room.
Right. And for those of us that are kind of mid-career, it's a big shift. Whereas some of the students, I think you were telling me that they had video interviews for their universities already, so it might be a little bit less of a transition.
Yeah, absolutely. More and more, right now, it's 70% of schools, universities, for both undergraduate programs and graduate programs are using video interviewing as a part of their recruitment process. So not only are you now submitting essays and personal statements along with your application, you'll likely be including 3 or 4 pre-recorded questions or answers to questions as a part of the recruitment process. They're looking at, are you a good fit? Can you communicate well? So more and more, these tools are there to help either universities or employers make a better decision around hiring.
And so there seem to me to be at least two different formats of video interviews. One is kind of just on Skype or Teams, you're literally just face to face with the interviewer and just replacing the in-person interview. But there are unique differences with the second format of video interviewing, which is having those pre-recorded questions. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those unique dynamics are?
Oh, absolutely. Well, so first of all, just to reiterate what you just said, there are those two types of video interviewing. And the first type, we're doing it right now. We're talking, we're having a great conversation. One of the things that's just important, that if this is the type of interview that you're going to have, that it's a conversation, and it's not in person, it's on video, is that you still have to treat it. Like, don't lull yourself into this state that, well, you're comfortable with FaceTime. Right. This will not be a problem. Yeah. So I'll talk to you in a few moments just about some tips that you should keep in mind when you're interviewing. But the second kind is with the pre-recorded. So the questions are provided ahead of time, or there's a platform that you sign into, and you're going to answer some questions, and you're going to be given some time to answer those questions. And that's a lot more difficult, right? Like, you need to keep in mind that you have to be prepared, and you have to have a sense of what that format's going to look like. So the more that you can do to research and understand the requirements, I think the more successful you'll be.
Okay, that's great. And so I guess in general, what are some tips that we can use to prepare for these video interviews?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of tips to keep in mind. First and foremost is treat it like a real interview. As I said, don't lull yourself into, well, I'm comfortable with video, not a problem. I'll just sit down, I'll answer the questions, and off I go. So demonstrate that you've done your research on the company, that you've done on the job, and that you're really ready to go, right? Like, you understand what the requirements are and how you're going to be an excellent candidate, and you're prepared with those responses. Beyond that, be prepared to answer the typical questions that you should be prepared for in an in-person interview, such as, tell me about yourself. Why are you a great fit for this company? What are some of your strengths? In addition to that, we've talked about this before, Eugene, is how important it is when you look at a job description is to understand what those key competencies that employer is looking for. Yes. And so your job in that interview is to prepare a response to a pre-recorded question that really demonstrates why you're a great fit. So it shows that if problem solving is an important aspect or competency of the job, or analytics, or being able to communicate effectively, that you've prepared stories that demonstrate your ability to, and you've had success in showing that you're able to be a great problem solver, that you've analyzed data, that you've communicated to groups, that you've worked on teams. Yeah,
and the key there is the word stories, right? Because a lot of times I think when I've been mentoring students from the undergrad program at U of T, what they tell me when they do the mock interviews is I've problem solved, or I've done analysis, and it's like, okay, great. Tell me more, right? Like, how did you actually do it, right? How did you tell me, how did you find the data set? How did you go in and what types of analysis did you try to do? Did you try to put it into different charts and different graphs and then, talk through that with your manager? Like, those are the things that resonate, that show the employer that you've actually been through it, that you've actually been through that battle and you're battle tested and you're ready to take on that next challenge, right?
Absolutely. Behavioral questions are a perfect way that you can predict their behavior, that candidate's behavior in the role that you're recruiting for, by seeing their past behavior. So giving more detail, and to your point, don't just tell me that you're a great problem solver, show me. Connect that story to what perhaps I'm looking for as a recruiter. So the more that you can do to prepare on all of these aspects of what you've done in the past, why you're a great fit,
Yeah.
will make a difference. And that can be in a pre-recorded answer that you give, or certainly in a conversation that you're having on Skype or on Zoom.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's great. So let's talk about also some of the different tips that you have in terms of like the actual video setup, right? So I know that to your point about not being complacent about being on FaceTime, when I'm on FaceTime with my parents, I don't need to worry about what's in my background, right?
Right.
So what are some of the tips that you would typically talk about?
Right. Well, be conscious of your whole setting. That's why I said if you have an opportunity to go onto the platform ahead of time and actually test your video, test your sound, definitely take a look at what's behind me. You know, do I have a poster that I really don't want the employer to see?
Yeah.
As well, you know, the angle and the lighting is just as important.
Yeah.
You know, we had a little bit of a test and I was a little bit too high or too low, or, you know, are you looking at the camera?
Yeah.
All of that makes a difference. You don't want to be positioned that you're looking up into the camera or down into the camera, but again, the lighting is reflecting well and the angles are right. So make sure that you're checking that out. If you do have the opportunity to practice, you know, you can see yourself. You can see that, you know, are there certain tendencies? Am I using my hands too much? And record it and practice it. I'm a big believer in practice, not because I ever want a candidate to come across sounding too scripted or contrived, but rather that you have thought through your stories, as we've talked about, that you're, you know, you can actually, you know, do you have good examples? Sometimes we're too long and we ramble, and other times too short and don't give enough detail. So for all those reasons, practice, practice, practice. You also want to check your clothes. You know, as the color of my my top, is it too light? Is it too dark given the lighting? Should I be wearing a jacket? Should I have a tie? And sometimes the answer is yes, and other times you don't know the answer.
Right.
So call the recruiter and ask, you know, what is the dress code? They might say, oh, we're here business casual. If that's the case, dress one level above whatever they tell you.
And like the dress and giving that attention to detail about your surroundings is a way of showing that respect and that care towards the person who's interviewing you too, or who's screening that video, because they're spending the time to go through it and they're spending the time with you, and you know, showing that level of respect is something that can differentiate you from the other candidates too.
Absolutely. One other tip that is sometimes we don't think about it is how you end your actual interview. And this is pre-recorded or one-on-one in conversation, is to end it on a positive note.
Right.
Because you may have answered it had great answers. You may have had felt that maybe you didn't quite hit that answer out of the ballpark.
Right.
By being positive at the end and enthusiastic and demonstrating your interest in the role, you can still turn things around. You know, and it is first impression, last impression. It matters. So always end on a positive note.
Yeah. That's a really good point. The first impression kind of sets the tone for how the interviewer is actually perceiving you throughout that interview, and then the last impression is what they're left with as they leave, right? So, to your point, just you know, reinforcing those two, the importance of those two.
Absolutely.
So, is there any other tips that you want to share? Anything else that you wanted to discuss about video interviewing at this point?
You know what? The last thing that I probably would say is make sure that, though I said, you know, go onto the platform that you're being asked to submit interview questions or answers on, but as well, do some research. There are a number of platforms that are out there that allow you to do just practice, right? So even before an interview, be prepared for a video interview. You know, check out what there is. Many of these platforms have practice questions in different industries that, you know, again, there are a number of them out there. So I'll let you just Google interview platforms and video interviewing, and you'll see a number of them. But make it one of your priorities in terms of your job search to start to practice online and video interviewing.
For sure. And just, you know, as you're talking about practice, something came to mind. One of the first things that we did at Rotman was we had a recording of our case presentation for one of the classes, and we had the opportunity to review that recording and to watch ourselves and to actually spot each of the different things that we were doing and and learn from that. It was super cringeworthy at first. It was super uncomfortable, super awkward, but you realize the value in actually having that focused attention to all of the details that go into your presentation and the way that you speak and the way that you're appearing in front of people. Yes.
You know what? If I could say, be brave. You know, be brave. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there, to videotape yourself and take a look, but be brave. You know, go full force into this type of video interviewing, and see the results. You know, especially if you can record yourself the first time, then make some adjustments, record yourself again. I know that you'll see some improvement along the way.
For sure. So I learned a lot from this chat that we had. Thank you so much, Annette, for joining me here. So if there's anything that, if anyone wants to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Well, I've got a website, fillercareermanagement.com. There's some information about my services as a career coach, and you can also leave me a note, and I will get back to you. So with any questions that you have, I'm happy to answer them.
That's great. Thank you. And Filler, that's Filler, Filler Career Management. Okay.
Yeah, career management.
Thank you so much for joining me. And it was great. I hope that everyone got a lot of value out of that. Thanks for joining me. And hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Eugene. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. Bye.